Hey everyone, welcome to episode 6 of the Local Soccer Show, brought to you by Evangelista Sports, Canada's premier soccer store, the biggest and the best one. We'd like to thank Nico and Carmelo, who have been our partners for a few years now, and we'd like to thank them for the excellent service they provide. Evangelista Sports is not only the Little Italy flagship store. They also have many other services for the local soccer community. You need jerseys, you need shorts, you need socks, you need equipment for your local soccer team. They can do all that for you, and they provide a great service. And we'd like to thank them again for sponsoring our show. So tonight we have a very special show, and we're really, really honored to have this wonderful guest, Valerio Gazzola, who's the technical director at the Laval Soccer Region. And we'll be talking about what Laval went through not too long ago to do the merger of several clubs. And now there are basically two main clubs. There's FC Laval and AS Laval. So Valerio will shed some light on that. We'll talk about the club licensing program, a little bit behind the scenes look at what happened and what transpired and what the objectives were. And one other topic we'll focus on tonight will be the meaningful competition regarding the U4 to U12 levels. We'll discuss grouping the kids and putting them in the right place when it comes to the competitive nature of the game. And we'll interact with you. Please send in your questions, and we'll try to answer them during the show. So we'll just do a little intro video, and then we'll welcome our guest. Welcome, Valerio, to the Local Soccer Show. How are you?
Very good, thank you, and thank you for having me. It's a pleasure, actually.
Thank you for coming on. It's a great honor and a privilege for us to have you on tonight to discuss soccer at the grassroots level. It's not a topic that's often talked about in general, so that was one of the objectives that Steve and I had, were to discuss these things with people such as yourself, to provide some valuable insights and debate, and we discussed different topics. And the whole point was really just for everyone to learn something and raise the level so the whole soccer community can benefit from it. So Steve is the one that usually does these interviews, and he's celebrating his 10th wedding anniversary, so he's actually in New York right now. So I'm here as a substitute. I'm not usually the one in front of the camera, so you'll see it's not really something that comes naturally for me, but I'll try my best. So Valerio, you come with many years of experience, and looking at your background and CV, you've done pretty much so many different things at so many different levels. Why don't we just focus like right now what you've been up to, let's say in the last 2 to 3 years, because or else we could talk just an hour on your CV.
No, but it's funny when you're saying you've been through a lot of stuff. It's true, but I was born here, and I did all my soccer here in Quebec. So from playing locally to going through the ranks and then going into coaching and all that. And look, the last 2 or 3 years, I've concentrated a lot with coaching education with Canada Soccer and with Quebec Soccer. And of course, I'm also technical director of Laval Soccer. So I've been involved in a lot of stuff like that. And look, even 4 years ago, I was coaching the Francophone teams when we went to Ivory Coast to play international games. So, I keep myself pretty busy, to be honest, with soccer.
Yep. And speaking of your current role, Laval did go through a significant change recently. Correct me if I'm wrong. I believe there used to be 6 clubs in Laval, and now they merge into 2 different clubs, correct?
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
So if you don't mind letting us know, like, what was the rationale behind doing all this, and what were your objectives?
Well, look, I think soccer in general needed a change, and it all started on top with the Canadian Soccer Association and Soccer Canada and Jason DeVos. He came in and said, "Look, the clubs can't all be treated the same way. There's different clubs, different levels, and it's not right that all the clubs need to abide by standards if they can't keep up the standards." So when Canada Soccer started the restructuring of clubs through levels, basically four levels, uh, Quebec Soccer obviously accepted this as well. And I think it was important within our own environment, each of the regions in Quebec, to look at the structure of their own environment and soccer environment and see, do we still have the right structure or not? And it was clear in Laval. We were fortunate, or we are fortunate, because we're one island, we're one city. We're around 8,000 kids, 7 to 8,000 kids, and you say to yourself, well, do we still keep six clubs? And if you keep six clubs in one island or one city, and they're all of different levels, well, kids are just going to be moving around. And I think what we really wanted was to stress the importance of the quality within the programs for the membership. That was the main goal. Same service for everybody. So if a kid lives in Vimont Laval, or they live in Saint Dorothée, or they live in Duvernay, whatever it is, that within the area that they're going to be playing in, that they're going to all get the same service and quality service. So the logical thing to do was to really look at maybe two clubs, separate the island into two, and but make these clubs quality clubs, national clubs. So right now, one of our clubs, AS Laval, is a national club, so we're really happy about that. And FC Laval on the west side is a regional club applying to become a national club. So the objectives are the same, to get the standards as high as possible, so that we have two clubs that are of high standards, that give quality service to all the membership, from a kid that steps on the field the first time, whether he's in the east, in the west, whatever it is, he's getting the same type of services. Of course, there's a difference in the clubs, and that's why the restructuring was done across the whole province. It's certainly when you get to a higher level, so that the competition is different depending on the level of the club. But here in Laval, we wanted to make sure that the grassroots, that players that are beginning, that the development of the 12 and under, 13 and under, 14 and under, more or less, get the same services to develop players.
Very good. And when it came to this restructuring, I'm assuming there were some clubs that maybe were a little bit hesitant at first. There might be even losing a bit of their identity and their history. We know what happened a little bit, at the professional level with the Montreal Impact. They changed their logo, changed their name, and people were really attached to that. Was there any feeling of that as well with some of the clubs, of having, quote unquote, lost a bit that old identity, their old name,
Yeah.
and their identity, like in the past?
Yeah, I mean, there's a big history of soccer in Laval since 1979. In fact, I played in Laval with Monterrey when I was 6 years old, and there is history. It took a 2-year process of uniting the presidents and the volunteers, bringing together the regional association with the presidents of the clubs. The city of Laval had a lot to do with it as well. They were behind the project as well. And, nothing, sometimes it's better to go and take your time and do it properly, but do it right. And I think this was the case, because we had to make sure that you somewhat take into consideration all the details before it really happens. And today in 2022, we're going to start the outdoor season, and the mergers are complete. It started last year, like
Okay.
the first merger that happened in FC Laval, but it was a 2-year process with discussions and all the uh, details or the management behind it, from the finances to the volunteers to the territories to the governance and everything else that goes with it, to the employees and how you do it and how you transition. um, it was a major project. And you know um, in the past there's been mergers with clubs. um, they don't always work. Most of the time, it doesn't happen. But we're fortunate, Laval, because we are one island, we are one city, we are every member that plays soccer lives in Laval, quote unquote.
Yeah.
The grassroots. So you're a payer de tax. You're in the same city. You're getting the same services everywhere. It's not like you have to negotiate with another city. And I applaud the volunteers. I applaud the 6 clubs. I applaud the presidents, because it wasn't easy. Um,
Yeah.
there were some real heavy discussions about the direction to go in. But like anything else, you make sure that you look into all the details before moving forward. And um, I think that was done, and today we're really happy to actually start the process of with the 2 new club teams. Like, the process of the merger is done now, so now it's about building the 2 clubs and starting, I guess, a new culture.
Yeah. And I'm assuming one of the rationales behind doing this was also a consolidation of resources, and also, I
Absolutely,
would assume, even efficiency wise, you
those
would
are
ensure
true.
better collaboration and when everyone's part of one team instead of 6 different units.
Those are 2 big words you use, because
Yeah.
just think of volunteers. If you're and people that are involved in volunteer soccer, with board members that are volunteer, you have 6 clubs with, I don't know, membership volunteers on the board of 6 to 10 people. Well, that's already 60 people, maybe. Here now we get quality people within 2 clubs. There's about 20 people, and people with expertise. It's not good enough just to be a volunteer, but an expertise in accounting, an expertise in
Yeah.
management, in finances, in marketing. I mean, those are the type of people that you're looking for, and expertise even in the technical level. We restructured not only in Laval but across Quebec, and one of the major, I guess, challenges is to make sure that we get quality technicians, quality technical directors, quality administrators in the clubs to manage all of this. And the higher the club, I guess, the more expertise you need. When you're a local club with a small club, sometimes you don't have the expertise. But I tell you, the more you grow, the more we're looking for in terms of criterias. They're
Hmm.
higher. Then you have to go get professionals. So yeah, the consolidation was a big factor. Uh, every time you consolidate, you say we're going to save costs. I don't
Yeah.
know if that's going to happen. In fact, I'll also say this, and I remember telling our membership, it doesn't mean that we'll get more people to sign up right away,
Yeah.
because there's been a drop in membership across not only the province but across the country, in the US as well. But at the same time, it was the right moment to restructure, because it's being done by Soccer Canada, because it's being done also by Quebec Soccer. So this was the right thing to do within our region as well.
Right. And since you mentioned this thing about Soccer Quebec and Soccer Canada, I believe you were also involved at the time with the club licensing, and you provided your input on the committees and all that. So if you can just briefly let us know, like, what was the rationale behind it? Because soccer existed for many years in Canada, and Soccer Quebec was always there, but it wasn't very, let's say, organized and structured like it is today. So I believe there were some valid reasons to do it, to make sure, I'm assuming, everyone to go on the same path and have certain standards to attain.
Yeah, I think that, like you said, the standards, not everyone has the same objectives,
Yeah.
but yet the standards were the same for everybody. And if the standards are the same, but you can't adhere to these standards, so what are you going to do now? You're going to close the club? That means you don't do soccer, you lose membership. So I think the right thing to do was to say, well, let's give categories to clubs. And the clubs will find their own niche. They'll find their own environment according to their situation. So, if you just want to do some local soccer and have fun and just have the kids come and play um, and just stay local, that's okay. There's no problem within your community. But some clubs aspire to really be high level youth clubs,
Mhm.
and that's why they're called national clubs or provincial clubs, to play at a different level in terms of competition. So, like I said, the criterias aren't the same. The standards are a lot higher. So, what you're thinking now is you're saying, well, then let's establish the criterias. So, what kind of a club will you be? Will you be a national, provincial, a regional, or just a local club? And I think everybody finds their way now into a level that can satisfy their needs, whether it's for volunteers, whether it's for moms and dads, whether it's for coaches that want to be high level coaches or just, being a volunteer coach, whether you want a full time job in soccer or you just want to do volunteer, and whether you want to be a high level player or you just want to do soccer for life. I think that's what has happened with the restructuring of the club licensing. It caters to the needs of, I think, everyone: the volunteers, the players, the referees, the governance, everything.
Right. Now, when it comes to this thing where you said there's the niche and everyone can pick their level and see where they're at, um, what do you think is something that could have helped in terms of evaluating and determining what is this level? Because what we've seen is, immediately from the beginning, it wasn't like everyone started at one level and then you move your way up. It was determined like right from the beginning whether, I'm assuming, like AS Laval, they got the national license right away. It's not like they were regional first and you moved your way up. Same thing with some other clubs. So, what do you think would have been like, let's say, a lesson learned from how to do this evaluation to put them, let's say, in the right place to start off on the right note right from the beginning?
Well, look, it's a great question, and there's no easy answer, and it's
Yeah,
easy after 2 years in hindsight to say, well, maybe we could have done this, we could have done that.
yeah,
I think the one thing you have to appreciate is you have to respect somewhat the history
yeah.
behind some of the clubs. So some of the clubs are maybe more advanced than others in the older structure. So you got to give some respect to those clubs. But the reality is that the application to determine your level was the same for everybody. So if a club did have the resources to
Yeah.
adhere to a national provincial standard, then you given that option to do it right away.
Okay.
Some
Yeah.
clubs thought they had it, but then when you look at the criterias, in the end, you say, oh, I don't have this, I don't have that, I don't have that. Maybe we're not where we think we should have been. Now, having said that, and after having done 2 years, and
Right.
I hate to say this because the pandemic did not give us a real clear picture
True. Yeah.
of really the performance of the clubs. You start later in the summer. The inscriptions started later. The competitions were all delayed, and then so once we get to some kind of normal some kind of level where it's normal, then you can better assess whether that was the right process or not. To start everybody at the same level, you could have done that too, but then
Yeah.
you're delaying the process, and
Yeah.
some people are a lot more hungrier than others. I think I think what's important is to say, look, we started the process. We had to, you have to take the first step. And whether it's the right step or not, 2 years later, you know that, well, we know what the criteria are, we know what the standards are. Now adhere to where you want to go and what you want to be. And I think it's okay in that respect for now, um, without thinking that we necessarily took the wrong step. On the contrary, I think the right steps were taken under the circumstances, under what what we knew, knowing that
Right.
it wasn't tried already before.
Right. Yeah, no, that makes sense. And now that you mentioned about levels, it brings me to the next topic that we wanted to cover, which was regarding the meaningful competition. So, um, from my parents, like parent volunteer, let's say, point of view, what I've seen happen was in the past, there was like the old fashioned way of like making teams where you would have the tryouts. The teams were basically a fixed list. Once you made a team, you were on it pretty much the whole season. And if you had more than one team at different levels, whatever level you were determined to be on at that time, that's where you'd play the whole time. There was no movement coming up or down. And then they went through this thing of, I'm assuming it was tied in with the club licensing and all that. It was about 2 to 3 years now. They did like some kind of experimentation, if you will. I know for my case, it's more in the Lac St. Louis region. I can't really speak to the other regions if they did this similar process, but they went away a little bit from that, and they did this thing where they wanted to make everyone have a chance to play and get the same training, which was good. But then they also, let's say, would mix levels of the kids. So I'll use the example of last summer. They made like teams with mixed rosters. So you'd have mixed levels of kids, where some are really good, some so, some a bit lower end. And they would make the teams like that. And that's pretty much how they played last summer for about half of the season. And then they did like some kind of recalibration for the second half of the season. And then pretty much that's how the that season had ended. And then also when it came to, let's say, the clubs where they were placed, it was also mixed. They didn't really set a certain level in terms of how the kids were placed in their respective pools or division, whichever word you want to use.
Mm.
So now what we've been hearing is for this summer, they're almost like going back to where things were before, sort of in a way, where the kids will be grouped again by their skill level. However, they want to have this option of open roster where a kid that's in, let's say, a lower division can move up, and vice versa. If there's a kid that's struggling, is moving down. So my first question to you was in terms of this whole process of like reevaluating how they're doing things, and it's almost like they're going full circle. A few things that come to mind initially. Firstly, my initial reaction when I heard this a few years ago was almost the reaction I got when you say, "Should we put pineapple on pizza?" I was like, "What? This doesn't make sense to me." So it's like initially, like, why? Like I was a bit skeptical. And then as I was doing some reading, I did read something in the FIFA Youth Training Manual where they never mention any of this stuff. And in fact, they actually say that groups should be made by the same level, not only for in terms of performance, it's also in terms of measuring how you compare yourself to other teams while you're playing in certain competitions. And then another thing I had read was what they did in Italy. They actually did a study where they compared the kids when they played with a similar skill level and when they were mixed. And they actually have data that showed that when they were mixed, kids touched the ball less, they didn't have as much fun,
Mm,
and there was frustration on both sides for
mm,
the kids that were at a higher level because the other ones couldn't keep up and they were frustrated. And then the kids at the lower level, they were getting frustrated as well because they realized they can't keep up
yeah,
and they never really got to touch the ball.
yeah.
So a lot of this was a lot of common sense to me anyway at the time. So I'm scratching my head. I'm like, if I feel this is not right, then I don't really have this expertise. I played the game since I was a little kid.
Mm.
It's more a common sense thing for me. I'm assuming there's people that don't have way more knowledge than me that must feel the same way. So my question to you is, what could have potentially happened? Was there a miscommunication in terms of what the objectives were and how they were relayed down from Soccer Canada to Soccer Quebec to the regions and to the clubs? Or was there something else going on where maybe the idea wasn't presented in a certain way and people misinterpreted? Like, what do you think why this thing came like almost full circle?
Yeah. So, Marcello, you touched on a lot of things. You just touched on a lot of things, and I think we can take them one by one. But
Yeah.
essentially, the objective is you have to make sure that um, the individual child that comes into a club gets quality training.
Okay.
So when that child comes in and they have a volunteer educator, and the educator maybe is just helping out, but doesn't have the expertise, well, then that child's not getting the proper training. Let's start with that.
Yeah.
So the the objective is to make sure that whoever comes in, the child that comes in, gets quality training. Therefore, when we say quality training for all, it's really to have a skill center where whether you're a group of 10 or a group of 60, when you're a group of 60, you're all getting the same quality training from an expertise point of view, from a
Mhm.
preparation, from being overseen by a quality educator that has an expertise, that caters and structures the volunteers or the coaches that are on the field with them. So, it's a bit like saying, well, I'm lucky, I have a good coach. And the other kid says, well, my coach doesn't know much. So somebody's going to suffer here. And that's
Mm.
not fair to the child. So
Yeah.
the skill centers were created to make sure that there's quality training for every child that comes onto the field and that they somehow get the coaching expertise. And, one of the things that Canada Soccer has done, they've risen the level of the coach educators to have a children's license. It's
Mm.
over 100 hours. It's a year course to make sure that you get that expertise on the field to work with the parents, to work with the educators. So that's the first thing. So, when you had these fixed teams with fixed coach, you don't know if the kid really has good coaching or not, good training or not, regular training or not. Whereas now with a skill center, you know, everyone shows up. They know that there's a content. They know that it's being structured. They know that they're going to be supervised. They know that all of that is in place for them to get the quality training. So it doesn't matter what level you're at, but basically, we said that anybody that's of the children's age, 12 and under, they all should be allowed to get the quality training that they got to get. So we don't call them teams, we call them groups.
Okay.
And so there are no permanent groups. The groups allow for players to move. And why do the players move? Well, they move for specific training or specific matches or specific objectives that you're trying to do in training. And you're actually using the matches as part of your training. As you know, we took away standings, we took away results, we took away all of that. They come onto the field and they play, which leads me now to maybe meaningful competition or significant competition. What it essentially means is that you want to make sure that the group of players that are going to show up on a field are playing a match against somebody else that are of the same level, so that the competition that you play, the match that you play, is meaningful. It's like you said, if we talk only about results, a team that wins 10-0,
Yeah.
a team that has the ball versus a team that never has the ball, somehow it's not significant for nobody.
No.
But we know that in the past this has happened. So what we're saying is that when you schedule games within your own club or within matches against other clubs, make sure that the matches are meaningful. Make sure that the cohesiveness of one group somewhat mimics the cohesiveness of another group. So, you mentioned, well, we're kind of coming back to the old system where, well, we have one division and a second division or a third division, and my child's going to play in that division. Well, your child can play in any division. It just depends.
Yeah.
I'll give you an example. Your child maybe plays at a level that's significant and common with everybody else. So they play the match, and it's meaningful. It's competitive. They're playing against each other. It's kind of even. Whether you lose 3-0, you win 3-0, but it's kind of even. But tomorrow morning, I might think, you know what, your 10-year-old, he has some leadership qualities to maybe lead a bit. Here, let me bring him back to a match where he can dominate a bit because I'm working on his development. That allows me with the grouping to
Right.
specifically try to attain certain objectives for individual players or a group of players. So that's what we mean by meaningful competition. Now, of course, there's a group of players that maybe are always the same or they're always in the same division. You're not going to avoid that. But what you're really trying to do is, what are the objectives for the next 2 or 3 weeks? What are you trying to accomplish? And how do I restructure the groups, making sure that there's meaningful competition? So let me maybe take it a step further. When a mom or a dad brings the child and says, okay, we're going to play soccer, good. But I want to play in Division 1. Oh, well, wait a minute. We offer you training, quality training, once a week, twice a week, 3 times a week. Great. Come and train. And we're guaranteeing you a game a week. But the game that you're going to play, we're guaranteeing you somehow that it's going to be meaningful. Don't ask, am I playing in first division, second division, or third division? That culture has to change. It has to be according to the needs of the child and meaningful to the child. You might think you're good, but when you're playing against better players, you become an ordinary player. Or you might think you're good, but when you look around, you say, oh, everyone else is below average. So really, you have to cater to the needs of the players. So I think that the thinking behind it is very logical. And I think what needs to change is the culture. What needs to change is, with, again, 1 or 2 years of having done this, there's going to be a bit more of a consistency. You mentioned, well, now they're having somewhat called divisions. Well, what they're really saying is, look, if you want to play, if you think that your group of players is of this level, then come and play. It'll be meaningful for that group of players. If your players are of this other level, will come in this group of players because it'll be meaningful. But what you don't want to do is sit there and tell the parent, you've made the team, you didn't make the team. Well, what do you mean make the team? What does that mean? Yeah. You're part of a group of 60 or 70 players. You're training, meaningful training at practice, meaningful competition at practice, and meaningful competition when you play games, maybe outside of your club against other teams. So, because quality for all, movement of the players, educating the parents, I think is important. You know, I tried to compare to elementary school. Like, really, don't you want everybody to somewhat get quality education at an elementary school? So there's some kind of a content. So it doesn't matter who teaches. There's standards and there's content. Well, that's what we're trying to ensure with the club teams and the development of the players.
Yeah, no, it makes total sense. And I'm putting myself in the shoes of a technical director, where you were mentioning earlier having two teams play against each other that are at the same level. It'll be a bit challenging for them to determine this before the season starts, in terms of knowing how their group is compared to another one, which is something that I think can be rectified if something could be done with the schedule during the season. So, for example, maybe let the kids play a month, 6 weeks, let's say, and then you assess after that point. You, as the technical director, you looked at your kids, you based it on your experience, you do an eye test, you see them play, you hope you got it right from the first time to say, I put them in this group or this pool, this division, whatever word you want to use. But then you see after a few games, there could be a club at another region, or sorry, they're playing in the same region, but another club within the region, they're really like ahead,
Yeah,
or maybe a few of them that are ahead.
yeah,
And you see the kids are a little bit struggling. Rather than make them suffer the whole season being put in that environment where, as you said
yeah,
earlier, it's not meaningful anymore, it's discouraging at that
yeah,
point. I think that would be helpful for the technical director to say, okay, we did 4 weeks of games. We're really underperforming. The
yeah,
kids, they can't compete at that level. We really got to rearrange something to make them play at a more level competition to what they're at this moment. And I
Mar-
think that would be something that can be helpful for everybody.
Marcello, I totally agree with you. And those type of scenarios should be put in place. There should be adaptations, um, um, because you evolve and then
Yeah,
you assess and then you adapt. In the old format, a league with 10 teams, okay, the bottom five teams never won a game, and they still have to play the whole season. Whereas,
right.
under those circumstances, whereas here, what we're saying is that you can move the players or you can move a group within a division to another division, and you allow that to happen. We know that, for example, in Laval, where we talk to other clubs from other regions, we're preparing schedules. Within the schedule, we have a couple of weeks to assess. Then we format the schedule. 4 or 5 weeks later, we reassess to see if we have to bring a group up or a group down. But again, the groups are not permanent either. So sometimes you don't have to change divisions more than changing a few players, maybe, if you understand what I mean.
Yeah.
So I think only a fool would not adapt to the needs and cater to the needs of the players. What good is it to bring a player to go play a game knowing that he's never going to touch the ball every week? Like, it's non-motivating, not fun. You don't learn anything, and you certainly don't learn about being competitive. So this is why it's important to have those periods where you assess, then you go on and play, and then you continue and readjust. I totally agree with you, and
Yeah.
it's doable. It is doable.
Well, it takes a bit of work, but yeah, because it's not, I know it's tricky for the region when it comes to field availability and making the schedule in advance. Obviously, it makes their life easier if it's all done for the whole season, schedule is done,
Well,
and then they don't have to do any work after the fact.
I know, but Marcello,
Yeah.
it's like, I don't know, a project, renovating project. You do an estimation,
Yeah.
you start the project. Now, if you didn't put aside an extra 10% for miscellaneous, for
Hmm.
surprises,
Yeah.
it always costs you more. So in your schedule, always allow for an extra field, an extra time, because halfway through you might be using that time. Like, it's doable. It's absolutely doable.
Yeah. So something you just mentioned that piqued my interest, and it's something I was very opinionated on, was frequency of touching the ball, and especially at a young age. I remember when my boys started at U4. Back then, there was no CDC, and basically, we were told get on the field, 5v5, put the kids on the field and let them play. I was against that from the beginning. I'm like, these are 3 and 4 year old kids. They don't even know how to run yet. They're learning how to coordinate themselves. They're touching a soccer ball for the first time. How could you just throw them on the field and let them play a game? And so that I was like perplexed. And then while the kids are playing, the ones that are on the field, you have 5 other ones that are just sitting on the grass waiting their turn. Now it's one thing when you're 8, 9 years old, you could sit down and wait. You tell a 4 and a 5 year old to sit down and just wait your turn while you're off on your shift. And I remember we were always running after the kids, telling them to stay on the
Yeah.
field. Like it was a real mess. And another thing I did some research on was from the American Pediatric Association, and they said it should be only at 6 years old that you can start organized sports for children. At that younger age, it shouldn't be. They should just go run around and play. And and I know in Italy, they also have a rule the kids do not start soccer till they're 5 years old. It's not
Mhm.
the year you're going to turn five. Before you go on the field, you actually have to be 5 years old.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering if we're doing a disservice to the children
Yeah.
that are younger. If I'm not saying don't let them play soccer,
Yeah.
make them play,
Yeah.
but don't make them play a game. Let them just a fun game. Make all of them have a ball. Let them as the more they touch the ball, the better it is for the child.
Yeah.
I'm
So,
wondering if that would help
yeah. So there's a
as
couple
they
of yeah, there's
yeah,
a couple of things, Marcello, that I'd like to share. So on the one hand, even in Germany, they've reformed and they're actually doing stuff that we're doing here now. All right,
yeah.
at the children's level. Um, Here we're looking at maybe 3v3
Okay.
at U8, at U7, 3v3,
Yeah, that
because
makes sense.
it has been shown that obviously it's a lot better than the 5v5. You know, when you talk about U4, U5, even U6, like, what's the objective of the club, to be honest? Because is it really soccer or just playing ball sports? Here, let's play soccer. Let's pitch and catch the ball. Let's, you know. So it's one thing to say get the 4 or 5 year old to play 2v2 soccer. No problem. Play 2v2. Play with your parents. Get on the field and have fun. You know, um, uh, show them other things. Even throughout the season, they can do other stuff that, as a club, you're not necessarily catering to soccer, but more to the activities of the kids and having all kinds of fun games. But it is being looked at U8, U7, U6 to be playing 2v2, 3v3 more than the 5v5,
Okay.
because you mentioned touches on the ball, staying engaged, interacting. Um, those are all things that um, I think there will be a change. I think we will go to a 3v3
Oh,
somewhat. U4, U5, U6. You wonder sometimes. Again, it's more about what's the objective of the club, because the kids want to move, and yet you have shifts. and if you're not playing, then you're not moving.
Right.
And now you're trying to tell them to stay quiet when in reality they want to move.
Yep.
So, so it's a big challenge because then you say, okay, a 5-year-old, well, let's just play 2v2, no problem. You need somewhat of one adult to take care of a 2v2. So in your club, can you get three adults to organize 2v2s? That's 12 players with three adults, and they're always playing. They're always moving. They're
Yep.
always catching the ball. And what are they actually playing? They're actually trying to score a goal, or are they actually trying to knock a cone down? Are they trying to hit a target? Are they trying to, I don't know, kick the ball in a bucket of water? Whatever it is, you
Yep.
know. So look, you've certainly brought some good points, certainly at that age level, and I think it's just to. I think clubs need to reflect on what they really want to do with the 4, 5, and 6-year-olds. I mean, there's other organizations that cater to the 4, 5, and 6-year-olds that are simply organizations that do multi-sport,
Yep.
multi-sport for 4, 5, and 6-year-olds. There's nothing that stops a club from doing that as well.
Yeah. And then as they move forward and they get a little bit older, another thing that comes up to mind in terms of developing the child, and I wanted to pick your brain on this. At what age would you let the child specialize in one position? Where you say, okay, you're a natural striker, you're a natural defender. At what age we say it's better that you stick to that position and become really good at that position versus getting to play all over the place?
Well, look, that's a huge question because in the modern game today,
Hmm.
everyone needs to almost know how to play multiple positions because even at the higher level, there's so much permutations, change
Hmm.
of positions that a winger can find themselves as a fullback, a winger can find themselves as a striker, a winger makes a run into the midfield, and all of a sudden they're a midfielder now. So when you talk about specializing in one position, it's one thing to say you're specialized in one position,
Right.
but now are you a versatile player? Certainly, I think that eventually players need to specialize.
Hmm.
And I would say, can you specialize on multiple positions, at least two or three positions, even at 14 years old? So, a player that's 14 years old, well, is he a center back or is he a number six, a holding midfielder? Are you a fullback or a winger? We still don't know.
Yeah.
You've gotten some great players, and Alfonso Davies is probably a great example. You
Yeah.
know, do we play him as a fullback or do you play him as a winger? And I know we're talking about children, and what I'm trying to say to you is that they don't
Yeah.
need to specialize at a young age. They just need to learn the principles of the game. They need to learn the principles of support, the principles of creating space, the principles of opening up, principles of the game. They don't need to specialize necessarily in a specific position. Now, as you move forward, you still have to structure them on a field. You play 7-a-side soccer, 9-a-side
Yeah.
soccer, 11-a-side. You still need some structure, but I think that specialization part will come at the right time when the player knows or when there's a need. But to actually specialize in something, I think the game has evolved so much right now that it's more about, well, what are your qualities? Oh, you're fast, you have stamina. Okay, maybe you play on the flanks. Does that mean I'm a fullback, an outside midfielder, a winger? You know,
Right.
so
And what about like the positioning on the field? At what age would you think would be appropriate for a coach to say have a whiteboard and teach the kids, okay, let's say you're playing, I don't know, 7v7, 9v9, and you have a practice where you teach them not like heavy duty tactics, don't get me wrong, but just a little bit of positioning to know, like,
yeah,
for example, if you're a left back, you have to stay on the left side of the field. Don't go become a striker or go all the way on the other side of the field, and then you leave your side completely empty and
yeah.
exposed.
Well, you mentioned the whiteboard. And so, what you really think, I think, and please correct me if I'm wrong,
Yeah.
you have to understand that people learn in different ways. Some of them are
Yeah.
visual,
Yeah. The
some of them are
visual thing. Yeah.
aesthetics, they need to move. Some of them comprehend right away. Some of them you actually have to put them in situations where they're actually doing the motions that you're asking them to do. So I'm saying that you have to mix all of this up. So can you use a whiteboard for a 10-year-old? Sure, depends what you want to show them, you know.
Yeah.
But some of them would not focus on the whiteboard. You actually have to take them on the field. Or you can show them with cones. You can show
Right.
them a little video. Hey, look at this video, right?
Yeah.
So there's many ways of teaching. The how, how you teach them and what you're going to teach them. I think this is why when we talk about that age group, that you need some expertise and you need some of these coaches that go get the licenses so they know how to transfer the information to the players. Um, so yeah, absolutely. I think you have to use different methods to teach the players.
Yeah, and I agree with you about the visuals, especially the kids of today. They're so bombarded with electronics, with TVs
Oh,
and iPads and computers.
yeah.
I
Well,
think it's
y-
it's an essential now.
well,
Yeah.
look, I'm not saying that a 10-year-old has a cell phone, but your 10-year-old says, "Hey, daddy, can I see your cell phone?" Oh,
Yeah.
really? Okay, so I'm the coach. I'm going to send you a little clip of a 10-year-old kid doing something. Hey, show this to your son. That already was, oh, he's looking it on a cell phone. He's looking on his
Yeah.
tablet or on the computer screen, and he's learning from it.
Yeah.
Whereas in the past, we didn't have this. Well, why not? I don't know. There, anything that I think where you're able to transfer information and for them to understand and retain, I think is a good thing.
Yeah. No, I agree with you because you want to adapt, right? You want to. The
But
world
in
of
the
today
end,
is not the same like it was when we were growing up.
yeah,
So,
but Marcello, the worst thing is a coach that just talks and
yeah.
doesn't get the players to get on the field and just whatever you're telling them, don't tell them. Tell them to do it. Don't just tell them. Tell them to do it. Get on the field and show them. Get on the field and ask them to try it. You know,
Yeah.
too many times is if you actually stand there and you take active time versus passive time in a session, you'd be surprised. A lot of times it's too passive, not
Yeah.
enough moving. Yeah.
So now one last topic before I let you go is talking about the World Cup. Um, it was quite an accomplishment for Canada to finally make it to the World Cup after all these years. And as Italo Canadians, we're also a little bit sad to have Italy not participate as well. So, my question to you is: did you ever imagine the day would come where Canada would be in a World Cup and not Italy?
Well, you know, I'll say this. I mean, of course not. The Italians, they're World Cup champions or European champions. They won cups. There's a culture there. But it just goes to show you that the sport has evolved to a level where you're only as good as today. It's very hard
Yeah,
to be consistent if you don't perform consistently. And it's funny because, the Italians, they won the European Cup. And I don't know, 6 months later or 8 months later, you didn't qualify. But the deficiencies they had at the European Cup of not being able to score, or having natural striker, or those showed up in the World Cup. Other teams adjusted. Now somebody could say, yeah, but you know what? We were one penalty shot away from qualifying. Well, the reality is that um, nothing's guaranteed. When you
no,
play one game in soccer, just one game, and you're playing against a country of only 2 million people, well, they can tie the game. There's no guarantees you're going to win the game. You can
yeah,
actually lose the game. So, I think the game has evolved to a level where it's today and now. Where are you today and now? And for Canada, I mean, my God, if you look at the lineup and you look at where the players are playing today, where they're in first divisions, they're starters, they're playing on a weekly basis, they compete for 3 points in the standings every week. Well, they're at a level where when they go into international competition, they're used to this level now.
Yeah.
And you hope that in 5 or 10 years from now, we still have those type of players still in top teams, starters, playing every week, getting the minutes in. Because if that's not happening, chances are you won't qualify. And that was one of the main reasons that we didn't qualify in the past. Is that, well, we had good players, but they weren't
Yeah.
playing on a weekly basis. So big difference, absolutely.
Yeah. And when it comes to Canada, I noticed you didn't mention MLS. And the reason I'm laughing and bringing this up is because of something that Don Garber had tweeted when Canada did qualify for the World Cup. I found it was a bit in bad taste for him to say, "Congratulations, Canada, making the World Cup. It's thanks to the MLS that you finally got to whatever." I forgot how he worded it, that
Yeah,
somehow, like, don't get me wrong, what he
yeah,
said factually was true to a
yeah,
certain extent.
yeah.
I just found it was a little bit in bad taste, not at that moment. He would have had plenty of time to talk about how the MLS helped to develop some of the players who then went to move on to Europe. Because for me, it's the experience in Europe that raised the bar for Canada.
Well, look,
MLS helped, but it's not because of MLS that Canada made the World Cup. I
yeah,
think it was like a stepping stone, but I didn't find it was appropriate for him at that time to say that. He could have just congratulated Canada and then a week later say MLS helped out.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think like everything else, I mean, it's one thing to say that MLS is not one of the top 5 leagues in the world. So somewhere in there, when you're thinking about the German league and the Spanish league and the English league, and you're saying, well, players that are playing in that environment are playing at a bit higher level than the MLS. On the other hand, it's important for players to be playing in first division leagues, I guess,
Yeah.
and they're getting the minutes in. So MLS contributed to this. So you get, the Kamal Millers of this world that a year ago you didn't know if he was going to play with the national team or not. Gets the minutes with Montreal in the MLS and is a starter with, more or less a starter
Yeah.
with the national team. So the MLS contributed in that way. But at the same time, uh, MLS is not top 5 leagues in the world. So, and everyone knows that. Don Garber would be the first one to say, yeah, you're right, but there's stability, the finances are good, the league is growing, and you hope that maybe one day it does get up there. But today, definitely, I think that any player that's playing minutes in a first division league in the top, 15 leagues in the world, uh, yeah, will somehow be um, playing with their national teams.
Yeah. And what do you think Canada will do in the World Cup? I think they'll be competitive. The It won't be easy. They're playing some really good teams in their group, but I don't think they're going to embarrass themselves. I think,
No,
yeah, yeah,
Canada will be well prepared, well
yeah,
structured, and the one thing this team has is, uh, their mindset. They're not afraid of anybody,
yeah,
and they got speed. I keep thinking of Canada when they played Mexico, or even when they played the U.S. They're intimidated by their speed, speed in transition, speed in execution, speed in getting up to the field. In
yeah,
counterattacks. I think those will be factors that the other countries that they're going to play against will take into consideration. Look, it'll be I mean, all the teams in the World Cup are all good, but
yeah,
Canada will be competitive. Absolutely.
yeah. And the last thing before I let you go, I don't know, do you follow the Serie A regularly or
Uh,
casually?
Only, you know what? Somebody would ask me, "What's your favorite team?" or "Do you follow?" What I do is I watch soccer, and I don't
Okay,
watch it with the same eye as a fan. I never watch it as a fan.
okay,
I'm always watching to analyze, watching to see what's going on,
yeah,
watching. I don't see it as a fan with standings and who's winning and who's in first place. But then, when you listen about some of the top teams and who's going there and who's coming there, and player transfers and all of that. You follow that as well, but I look more at the trends of the game.
Okay. Now, the reason I ask is, as you know, we're part of Milan Club Montreal, and we're hardcore
Of
Milanistas. And
course.
right now, with 4 games left to play, it's gonna go down to the wire. I really think it's the actual last game of the season will determine the Scudetto winner. So it's really exciting. It's probably the most exciting season for the general Serie A fan, except for the Juventini that will laugh at me saying it was exciting 9 years in a row. So, but in terms of general interest, I think it's fantastic for the league that
Well, I
you have this level of competition right till the end.
there you go, and I think that's what anybody wants. I
Yeah,
mean, if you're going to be that one team that buys the best players and will dominate and always win, I get it.
yeah,
But competition wise and keeping interest, sometimes that's where you lose the interest.
yeah. Very good. Well, Valerio, it was a real pleasure and an honor to speak with you tonight. Thank you so much for sharing your wonderful insights. I hope people watching can, you know, learn from your experience. And as I said earlier, our goal was really just to share and have dialogue, and we can all learn to make grassroots soccer better for everyone. So thanks again. And I hope we'll have you on soon in a future episode.
Well, I applaud you guys, because when you asked and it was about grassroots, the game,
Yeah.
the children, I think that's amazing. Congratulations on you guys.
Thank you so much.